This is Dom Bettinelli, the CEO of SQPN, with a brief but very important message. For more than a decade, SQPN has produced the Catholic faith and pop culture podcasts that you love. We're a nonprofit organization, so it's only your generosity that lets us carry out our mission. We haven't run a fundraiser in 2 years, and that's why we need to ask for your help right now. Please make a pledge of whatever amount you can afford to help us continue providing your favorite podcasts, as well as exciting new ones we have planned. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. Thank you for your generosity. May we hear from you today? You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 99.
Don't be scared. All of this is new to you, and new can be scary. When people need help, I never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Don Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. Today we're discussing Demons of the Punjab. And joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
As I always do, I want to start by asking everyone to remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on our Facebook page. There is a Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page where we have some great conversations and feedback from folks. And if you can join us there and leave us feedback on episodes, that we'd greatly appreciate it to like, to comment, to share. That helps us get the news out. The other ways you can help us is retweet the episodes on Twitter, to subscribe to the podcast. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, you please do so in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, even on YouTube, where you should hit the bell on YouTube to get notifications, as they say on among the YouTube set. And please share the podcast with your friends to help us grow. That's the idea. Is we want to grow, to reach more people, to have a wider conversation, because we love Doctor Who and we would love to have more people join us in this conversation. So please do that. And I want to remind you, as you heard at the beginning of this podcast, we are in our fall giving campaign. You've heard us talk about it several times in recent weeks, and we do need you now to join us in this giving campaign to make a pledge or a gift to help us continue our mission. This podcast network, we are a network of podcasts, and we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization that we're doing this not just for our own fun, although as much as we enjoy it, but we're doing this because we have a mission to explore the intersection of faith and pop culture. And one way we do that is through The Secrets of Doctor Who. We want to continue doing this, and we need your help to do that. And so if you could go to sqpn.com/give, and if you do so, we have some nice gifts we would like to give as a thank you. Some of them are Doctor Who related. So sqpn.com/give. So the Demons of the Punjab, I'll give you the quick 20-second recap. Yaz, one of the companions who has gotten the least amount of attention so far, she wants to learn more about the life of her grandmother, who was famously the first woman married in Pakistan, presumably after Pakistan became a country in 1947. So the 13th Doctor brings her friends to the Punjab in 1947, but all kinds of
stuff happens. Strange
things happens, and we'll talk about that. So I want to give my assessment, sort of like my one-sentence assessment up front. This is Rosa 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's essentially Rosa again.
This is the British version of Rosa, whereas racial hostility and segregation is a scar on the memory and the conscience of America. This situation in India and the partition between India and Pakistan is a legacy of British colonialism, and it corresponds to a similar kind of scar on the history and memory of Great Britain. And so this is sort of the British version of Rosa.
Right.
You know, it was interesting because I realized as we were watching it that I really don't know a lot about the history of this. I knew a little bit. I knew that that the border was basically forced by Britain. Britain basically said, we're just drawing this border. Boom, there it is. And that it's been a very contentious border ever since, still to this day. It's a very, very, very troubled border.
They're both nuclear powers, and they've almost gone to war like 3 times.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, I had a priest from India who was here as a parochial vicar for a year, and he's from that part of India that's right up in the northern part by Pakistan, and he's told me some of the stories of what life is like up there. You know, of course, Catholics up there do not have it easy by any stretch of the imagination, because neither side likes the Catholics.
They're hated on both sides of the border.
You know, so it's a very difficult. I mean, it's a very difficult part of the world to understate the issues. Obviously,
the partition was to put Muslims on one side and Hindus on the other. Essentially, that was sort of the idea,
right?
And it would that was essentially the idea as a way of easing interethnic tensions.
Didn't work.
Well, we can't see the alternative timeline where they didn't partition it.
That's true.
So it's hard to know which situation is better. However, it's certainly not pacified things in our timeline. I would be curious, obviously we have listeners in the UK, and I'd be curious to hear their feedback on this episode. We may also have listeners in India and Pakistan. English is widely spoken there. In fact, I happen to know that English is one of the official liturgical languages for Catholics in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. And so they're part of ICEL, the International Committee on English and Liturgy. And so we may have listeners there. I would be real curious to hear their perspective on all of this. One thing that is, and this is on, kind of the overall dramatic level, but one difference between this and Rosa is that this focuses on our characters, not on major political figures. Whereas in Rosa, we had Rosa Parks and we had a cameo by Martin Luther King. The equivalent of that would be focusing on what was happening with Mohandas Gandhi in India, because he was very much opposed to the partition. He did not want India divided, and he was very passionate about that fact. And he famously, like in that context, declared, I am a Hindu and a Muslim and a Christian and a Jew. He didn't want, even though he was Hindu, actually, as a symbolic statement, he identified with each of the communities as a way of saying we need to all stick together here. And actually the fact that he was opposed to the partition led to his assassination, because it was one of his own. It was a Hindu who opposed Gandhi's views that ended up shooting him. And so I was a little surprised that, given that the partition is the big driving factor of the plot here, that we didn't even get a mention of Gandhi in this. Much less did we focus on him. And I think, though, that actually that made the episode succeed in a way dramatically. Now, actually, I would have had at least a brief reference to Gandhi on the radio, or maybe a little brief speech from him on the radio, just to acknowledge his relation to this issue historically, kind of like we had the Martin Luther King cameo in Rosa. But the fact that we didn't focus on major historical figures in this episode allowed our characters to breathe and have more complex interactions, which allowed this episode, for example, to have a more nuanced portrait of the ethnic tensions here than what we got in Rosa, because here we have division within Prem's own family on the partition question, where his brother is very much in favor of it. We see other Hindus who happen to be masked, but we see them who are also very much in favor of it. Prem is not in favor of it. So we have some complexity there. They could have gone more complex than they did, because we didn't see any Muslims who were in favor of the partition, or who were fighting back. All the Muslims we see in this are just victims. Whereas there would have been people who, it's like, our community is under threat, we need to respond somehow. And so they didn't go as complex as they could have, but they went much more complex than they did in Rosa, where every white American is bad that we meet.
Right. Speaking of Gandhi not showing up, someone else who could show up, and it would be not because she's related to partition, but because a significant event happened around this time, which is Mother Teresa. She had what she called her call within a call, when she decided to become, found the Missionaries of Charity around this time, a little before this, in September of 1946. This was 1947. But still, as I'm reflecting on it, it would be interesting to have a 13th Doctor encounter with Mother Teresa. I'm not sure how I would like it, but I would be if it were written well. Maybe I should write a spec script for Chris Chibnall.
There you go.
But I would love to see that sort of encounter done well. But that's that's not really this episode. But
I don't put a lot of hope that would go well.
No.
But one thing I do like about this episode is I think it showed a reality that wasn't just in India. It's something we see throughout human nature, and it's this idea of these hatreds that keep coming up, this group violence that keeps coming up. I struck at that scene at the end, and we'll talk about obviously what everything that happened, but where Prem recognizes the guy he's fought with in the war, and it reminded me of the Rwandan genocide. If you've heard, Immaculate Iligabaza's story of surviving the Rwandan genocide, same demographic, same ideas going on, that these are people who live together. They were family friends for generations. And then one day it's like a switch was thrown and they turned against each other. And it's, much the same kind of situation. Yes. We see this over and over. I'm going to get political here, but to take to our own time, you look at groups on the left, like Antifa, and the groups on the right, like the white supremacists in our own here in the United States. It's the same kind of mindset coming back again and again and again and again, and it's interesting to see the way they portrayed those movements rising up during the time of the partition.
I think it was quite intentional. In fact, I mean, that seems to be an overarching idea in this season, is the divisions among peoples that need to be healed, that may be exacerbated in the current situation, and so I think that was certainly the case in Rosa. That was the case in Arachnids in the UK, and it was the case here. I mean, I think they've been building that idea.
This episode, though, really recapitulated the same themes as Rosa in a way Arachnids in the UK didn't. And that raises a question in my mind, not about the quality of this episode, but about the writing choices for this season. Because this is just 2 episodes after Rosa, and we have a very similar episode.
Yes.
It's like, you're repeating yourself a little quickly here.
Well, the other thing that comes up is something that's kind of fundamental to this episode, and that's similar to Rosa, which is there's a criticism been leveled at Chris Chibnall with this season of Doctor Who and his version of Doctor Who, which is the science fiction alien bits almost seem tacked on. Because, and this is a big part of what I want. I like this episode in many ways, but one thing that bugged me about this episode is the aliens in this. There was no point to the aliens of this episode, that they didn't serve any purpose. They didn't.
This could have been a strict historical, and it would have been just as good an episode.
But at the end of the episode, if you look back and you go, if those aliens weren't there, would anything have been different? No. Like, it was they served the only purpose they really served is I think to connect it to the date on which it aired, which is it was a very intentional, I think, connection to what in Britain we call Remembrance Day, in the U.S. we call Veterans Day, but it's the day, it's Armistice Day. As we record this is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, and there's a lot of people remembering it. So there were poppies throughout, and poppies are, of course, important part of the remembrance of Remembrance Day. But the theme of remembrance, and especially of those who have served, and by the way, Father Corey, happy Veterans Day to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yep. Thank you very much.
But to remember those who have served, to remember those who have died, and I think so. They played that role, and of course, we'll talk about that a little more as we go on. But apart from that, I just didn't feel like those aliens they had a point.
Yeah, and they do provide one thing plot-wise that is valuable, which is they somehow know that Prim is going to die. And they don't explain how they know that, but they know that. And that they communicate that knowledge to the Doctor, who then communicates it to the companions. And for the last 15 minutes of the episode, the companions know Prim is going to die. And that puts the companions in particular, and thereby the audience, in a position that we're not often in, where we know that something terrible is going to happen, and there's really not going to be a way to fix it.
Yeah.
The Doctor occasionally has encountered this, like in the Waters of Mars, and we've kind of been in situations like this, like in the serial we reviewed from the first Doctor's time, The Aztecs, where Barbara wants to like re-edit Aztec culture so that it's gentler, and the Doctor's saying that's not going to work. And in the end, the Doctor's right. But here we know something specific, that just this is a fixed point in time. Prim is going to die. We cannot change that. And we have to hide it from everybody.
Well, she never actually uses that term. In fact, she kind of lays it down on, look, it's not that we can't change it, but if we did change it, you wouldn't be here. I think
exactly
it's a subtle but important distinction in the way that they kind of phrase, they kind of lay out the story. It's important to Yaz's personal history.
That's the way the Doctor presents it. The way I'm got to look at my notes for their name. The Thijarians, yeah. The way the Thijarians present it, though, because when they're talking to the Doctor says, "Can't you change this?" And they say, "We're not gods." And then they have a bit of dialogue that, frankly, I couldn't understand because of the accent problem.
Yeah.
And the vocal special effects problems, because those are re-edited voices. But what I took away from it was, at least in the Thijarians' view, this is the equivalent of a fixed point in time.
Right.
So maybe they articulated it both ways, because you're right. The Doctor did articulate it to Yaz differently.
Yeah. All right. So,
but you would suppose, okay, there would be ways, if this is not a fixed point in time, you could hypothetically say, okay, they get married, they fake Prim's death, and then get him out of there. So Prim survives, but Yaz's Grand thinks he's died, and everything in her life unfolds as normal.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Just kind of a quick aside. At least these aliens are a little bit more plausible than Lieutenant Saru on Discovery, where he knows death is coming. At least they've got got the time travel aspect,
right? Yes,
or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's get into the episode. So what we have is we start out with Yaz celebrating with her family her grandmother's birthday. Her grandmother Umbreen, who tells us she was the first woman married in Pakistan. And they didn't explain it, but I'm like, well, there probably had to have been, like, you had to know that Pakistan became a country in 1947. They don't actually lay that out for you right after. So in some ways, that's good that they don't, they expect the audience to kind of know some things.
And for the British audience, that would be more common knowledge than it is here.
Right.
Correct.
They also mentioned that she was the first Muslim to work in a mill or a textile mill in Yorkshire, or something along those lines. So they're kind of establishing her background. And for her birthday, the grandmother's giving out gifts.
Which is odd, and especially saying, I'm giving these away before it's too late. And normally giving away property and ideating death is a sign of imminent suicide. So I'm a little concerned for Gran here.
To be fair, it could also be illness. I mean, it could be a illness. But
I think they mean us to understand it's just old age.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
She's a hobbit. Maybe that's what we do. And so she gives she gives the younger granddaughter a poppy, doesn't explain it, and that never gets explained in the episode.
It never. I know. You do not do that to us. She says, "This is a present your grandfather gave me. I can't remember why." Okay, you've just made a promise to the viewer that you're going to explain why.
Right, and doesn't.
Do not do that. Give her something else and say, "This is something your grandfather gave me. It's really nice. I think you'll like it." That's all you got to say.
Well, and then we have the watch that she gives to Yaz, which
must
broken.
never be fixed.
And see, this is the thing that drives me crazy with not just Doctor Who or things, but a lot of TV stories is I'm doing this thing. I can't tell you why, and you can't ask me. Like,
yeah,
what? Don't bring it up then. Like, what do you? Why you? Like, if you can't tell me, then why do you bring it up?
When you go with the title of the episode, Demons of the Punjab. And then you have this, don't fix this watch. It's like, what is the watch an important part of how they vanquished the demons?
You know, it's Chekhov's watch.
No, it's just
it's going to come up later, but yeah.
And that's just our, I kind of gave him this one, even though it's a common trope. I gave him this one this is how they're going to get the plot moving.
Right.
Yep.
So Yaz gets it in her head that she now needs to find out what really happened with her Nan and her grandfather and the significance of this and so she goes to the doctor and she wants the doctor to take her back to the Punjab when her Nan was younger. Now the doctor says something here. She says it could be dangerous, and Graham says, "Oh, like we haven't seen that yet, danger yet." And then the doctor says, "I've apologized for the." Death's
Eye Turtle Army is how I heard it.
That's what I heard too. So I played it back like 4 times to try to get, because I don't have subtitles on what I was watching, and I'm like it's the accent thing, like and how fast Jodie Whittaker talks. She talks fast. So because with Doctor Who it could be anything. It could be Death's Eye Turtle Army.
Well, then they bring up the turtle again. I mean, there's something about as long as there's no killer turtles or something like that.
Right. So I guess that must be what it is. But gosh, it was like we probably should mention for quite a number of American viewers. I've heard from several people. The accents are putting them off from the show, that they are not enjoying because it's so difficult to understand compared to, whether it's Capaldi's Scottish accent or, the other British accents that we've had, in the past. I mean, they had David Tennant famously not speaking his native accent. Whereas with this, the Yorkshire accent, it's tough going for non-Brits. Well, maybe for some Brits it's tough too. But for us Americans, this is tough going, and it may affect people's enjoyment of the show going forward. So anyway.
Yeah. I've just pulled it up with subtitles, and it is the Death Eye Turtle Army.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe it's the Ninja Turtles helped out with that one. So the doctor kind of talks about the danger of going back in time, to observe your own family, and we know about that, right? Because we saw what happened when Rose went back to see her dad in Father's Day. The time pterodactyls show up and they start massacring people. So we don't.
Yep.
So in some ways, this sort of is a little like that. Not the same sort of thing, but it recalls that anyway.
Yeah, and we've touched on the delicacy of involving yourself in your own timeline before. In fact, that's one of the big rules of time is for Time Lords is they're not to cross their own timeline. For various reasons.
Right.
Unless there's an emergency on Gallifrey or
yeah. The thing that I love the most about this scene, though, I like the dialogue, with Graham saying, "Oh, it's not like we haven't encountered risk before." But what my favoriteest thing is when they finally convince the doctor to do this, even though she's protesting she shouldn't. She says no, and then all 3 companions say interfering. It's like awesome. They've got her sussed out.
Yeah, that's right. So they pop back to India. The doctor uses she says, "Oh, the telepathic time circuits will figure out where we need to go." And then they call her on it, and she says, well, okay, it's really complicated, and then she gives this sort of, pseudo-scientific explanation. I'm like, okay, at least they're kind of trying to give some basis for the hand-wavium that we're going on here to why we're letting the TARDIS take us here.
And they've used the telepathic circuits before. I think it was during Capaldi, they had something where Claire is like stuck her hand in the console in this little weird spot, and the TARDIS immediately took off. And...
Yeah. So we've had that before, but we get a little more explanation this time.
What I liked when they got to the Punjab is so they noticed they're not in Lahore,
right?
Which is a big city. And then the doctor has this brief telepathic vision. We don't know what it is at the time, but it's later. She's telepathically sensitive to the presence of the Thijarians, and it's not pleasant for her. And that kind of gets her into this worried zone where she doesn't know what's happening, but she's really worried. And I like that. I like how worried the doctor is here and how she feels out of her depth with what's going on. That's very nice. It's such a relief after all the strutting, overconfident doctors we've had recently.
So one thing I want to mention is the location shooting. I don't know where the location was that they used to shoot this, but it was beautiful outdoors. It doesn't look anything in Britain that I know of. It must be Spain. They often use Spain as a location.
Yeah, and I have in my notes, I mean, I was impressed with the initial location shooting, but like later, and I noted it specifically towards the end where Prem is like striding out to meet his fate. He comes out of the barn or the house or whatever it is, and the sunlight is so bright and the colors are so vivid. And I just thought I just love the visual design of this, the way they're shooting this.
It occurs to me it could also be South Africa because that's where they did Ghost Monument. So that's another possibility that they've done. So they meet Prim, and based on a hint from our friend listener Bennett Gillespie, I looked up what the word Prem means. It's a Sanskrit word for love, meaning pure, unconditional love that leads to total devotion and surrender. So, interesting choice.
So based on the Star Trek Next Generation episode, The Offspring, that would make Yaz's grand Prem's lol.
Yes, I suppose that would.
Yeah.
So the Prem is on her way to his wedding. We encounter a sadhu, which is a Hindu holy man, on the way. He's walking to go there. He's going to officiate at the wedding. Who is uncredited, by the way. And I noticed his name is Bhakti and doesn't get a credit, which is interesting. But I wonder if he's a real sadhu. Would be interesting. So we have this encounter. So Yaz meets her Gran, and then we have this weird thing where Gran's not marrying Granddad. She's marrying this other guy. Who's he? And then
I like how I think it's Graham who says maybe she had a secret first husband.
Right.
And that, okay, little bit of family background on me. That clicked for me in a special way because it turned out one of my grandfathers was the secret first husband.
Really?
Yeah, I discovered just a few years ago, I have a secret uncle I had not known anything about because one of my grandfathers had an initial family before he married my grandmother, and that family had offspring, and I've since made contact with them. But it came as a total shock to me as a grandchild to discover that there was this secret first family that I was unaware of and that had never been talked about in my entire life. And so for me, it's like, okay, this was my Yaz moment where.
Wow. And so the disorientation that you would experience where suddenly there's this whole family and all this very strange, disorientation that I guess that was the right word, is that you experience in that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy in the photo that she knows as her grandfather, is that not Manish, Prem's brother?
I didn't think it was.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't see it close enough.
I don't see how it could be.
Yeah, well,
the events of this episode.
See, that's the thing is I got confused right off the bat that I thought, oh, it's his brother who she really married. And then the rest of the episode, I'm like, wait, what? Like, and I was, that might have affected my enjoyment of the episode a little.
That thought flicked through my mind too, right at the beginning, but I dismissed it pretty quickly.
Yeah, because the photo was on screen for just briefly, and whoever the guy is they chose for that photo looked a lot like Manish. So they could have had the photo. They could have picked a guy who looked more different, and Yaz could have had the photo in her pocket and said, "No, look, this isn't him," and given us a big close up of it. Right. So we could probably presume that the guy who's her actual grandfather is somebody her grand met when they got to Lahore after the events of this episode. Okay. So, all right. So that's all right. So they, but yeah, now I don't recall exactly why they went into the woods looking for the Sadhu.
They were chasing the Thijarians.
Okay. That's right. The Thijarians show up and, Prem shoots at them with his service rifle.
And for once, we don't get an anti-gun sermon.
Like,
exactly.
That was one of my notes. The doctor does not have a problem with Prim's gun at any point in this episode. And I thought that was very... It was. I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but obviously, but it seems very inconsistent suddenly.
Well, one point of interest, though, is this is the first episode that does not have Chris Chibnall in the writers.
Right. We didn't mention that the writer is Vinay Patel.
Although showrunners get a pass at the scripts anyway.
Right.
So he could have easily inserted that if he wanted. I would assume that it's a sign of sanity on the part of the writers, and that it's like, okay, we've made our point about guns. We don't need to hit that note every single time a gun shows up on the show. Right. Because the doctor, historically has not been anti-gun, and we've talked about it. But in recent history has been very vocal against any guns whenever they show up. All right, so let's put a pin in that. Set it aside. Did we bring up that Chibnall? This is the first not written or co-written by Chibnall before. I'm not sure, but this. No. We mentioned it just now.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure that we said that explicitly.
At least in the timeline that Father Corey and I occupy.
I must be.
Yeah, exactly.
I must have gone through a wormhole right there for a second.
Just don't send a probe back.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Hey, listen to Secrets of Star Trek. You understand why we're talking about that. They've encountered the Thijarians that we think, okay, these must be the demons of the Punjab. Ha ha ha! It's classic misdirection, of course. We find out that they are the Thijarian Hive, the deadliest assassins in the known universe. Not just any assassins. They're the deadliest assassins in the known universe.
I had a little Stephen Moffat flashback there.
Yeah, it's got to be the biggest. And if they really were the biggest, she would know more about them than she does.
Well, and apparently her information is quite a lot out of date because they're no longer in the business of assassination.
Well, so, they kind of did the this is another ancient race that predates like all of everything and all that.
Exactly.
I liked how their faces looked like bat faces with spider eyes and tusks.
Yes, though that I had the design of the Thijarians I liked that. In fact, so far between them and Tim Shaw, the creature design has been pretty impressive this season. I have to say that.
Yeah, although I don't like the spiky, droopy things they have as their shoulder pads.
It reminds me just a little bit of the Star Trek Discovery Klingons.
That's what I was just saying. They're taking the same design cues as Star Trek Discovery.
Yes. So we have this. I don't want to go through everything, but there's a lot of back and forth. At one point, I think it's Graham who says to Ryan. Or was it to Ryan or to Prem? I don't know whether any of us know the real truth of our lives because we're too busy on the inside living it.
He's talking to Yaz.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's when they're sitting outside. And she's discouraged because she doesn't know the family history that she thought she did.
Right. So I like this line. This is a very good moment, and it's a very interesting perspective. So I don't want to go past it too quick. I don't know whether any of us know the real truth of our lives because we're too busy on the inside living it. Live this moment and figure it out later. And I like that. because I think there's that temptation, and I think TV and movies kind of encourage us to that temptation to kind of think about the awesome significance of our moments in our lives and what does it all mean, and especially when you're younger, you worry about that. I think sometimes, hey, just live your life, live it well.
I really like how, once again, Graham comes off really nice in this episode.
Yes.
I like the fact that when Bhakti has been killed and they find his body and they're puzzling over what it means and what they need to do next, Graham is the one who says this fella needs to be laid to rest.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has the nice conversation with Yaz. He has nice conversations with Prem's brother and with Ryan, and he's really kind of among the companions, he's kind of coming across as the most mature companion and as the central companion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not the flashiest necessarily. He's not the one. We've actually had more focus on Ryan and on Yaz than we have on Graham, but he's kind of the sensible center that kind of functions to keep things moving other than among the companions when the doctor's not around.
Well, it's interesting that the development, because I remember when we were talking about the first episode, we weren't a big fan of Graham.
Yeah.
No. He seemed very flat in one note and kind of a coward.
Standoffish.
And they really developed him incredibly throughout these episodes. I mean, he's the one character I think that they've developed the most out of all of them.
He reminds me a lot of Donna Noble's grandfather, Wilfred, who was only a companion very briefly and very significantly caused the regeneration of the 10th Doctor. But in that sense of he's a mature center. I like that. I mean, Graham is probably the most mature, not flaky
companion we've had in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of young women who kind of run around and Doctor's my boyfriend, and I mean, I love Clara and I love Amy, and I mean, but I love Wilfred and Graham both have had a presence that none of the others have had, and I'd love to see an older grandmotherly type. That would be fun and interesting as well.
It would, one thing that Graham has. Okay, so Graham is actually more mature than the Doctor is.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Doctor is more flighty and scatterbrained. Graham is more sensible, and Graham is even more sensible than Wilfred, because Wilfred had this Doctor worship thing going on where. To him, David Tennant's Doctor was, just the most wonderful man, fall all over myself thing.
Yeah.
And Graham doesn't have that. He's with the Doctor. He responds to the Doctor much more as an equal.
Yes. Yes. And they've talked about that going in, is that the companions would not just be followers, that the companions would be friends. They'd be equals to the Doctor, much more so this season. And that certainly comes up with Graham. I mean, and the actor is really a great actor. So I mean, it's hard to expect anything else.
The only thing I regret is they haven't given him much room for comedy this season, because my introduction to him, I did not know the actor previously, and this summer at Comic-Con they had the entire crew come over to Comic-Con. I saw a video of the panel discussion because I don't go to Comic-Con because it's too crowded. I don't go anymore.
Right.
But the in the panel discussion, all of the TARDIS crew was there except Graham, but the actors sent a video that they played, and he was back in England, and it was just the most hilarious thing in the world. He was like putting on Jodie Whittaker's hoodie and doing the Doctor Who theme song as this doodly doo doodly doo doodly doo and mincing about as pretending he's Jodie Whittaker getting into her trailer. And it was just the funniest thing.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, Graham is going to be this awesome comedic character. And he really hasn't been that. So, but the actor has clear comic chops. It was the funnest thing in the whole panel.
Well, I believe that's how he kind of got his start, was as, doing like stand-up comedy and comedic roles and things like that. And he's kind of transitioned, as many do. It's funny, is some of the best drama actors are comedians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
because
I hope
they can do that.
I hope they give him some comedy to do at some point, because he was really good at it.
Yeah, if he sticks around maybe for the next season, because he's a grieving husband right now, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to get the comedy, but hopefully he'll stick around for a bit. So one of the things we've talked about is the ways that Doctor Who builds drama in an episode, in the stories, and one of the ways we have is TARDIS separation. So the Doctor and the companions are separated from the TARDIS, and therefore they have to get back to it. And we saw that in Ghost Monument. We have companion separation or Doctor separation, where the companion has to solve the problem on their own without the help of the Doctor, and they have to get themselves back together again. There's a new one which they've really introduced in this season, which is Sonic separation. This Doctor's Sonic is either drained of power or rebooted, or
too many inputs.
She didn't have it at all for most of the first episode. So I find that very interesting that we've got this, like, the Sonic has become this dramatic tool that they use to set the Doctor, to set her back.
They still use it way too much. And this season, I think, is probably the worst. But at least they have introduced the idea that the Sonic is not infallible, perfect, always powered up, always going to work, going to do everything the Doctor needs.
Yes.
That once in a while it will fail.
Right.
They need to be careful how they do this, though, because if it becomes too inconsistent, then it's going to become obvious as, it only works when the plot requires it. And that's going to become an object of derision.
One of the ways, just as an example of the overuse of the Sonic, is at the end where we have the wedding ceremony, the Doctor uses it to untie the rope in front of her. Like, you could just untie the rope.
Exactly.
Like, what's with this? The Sonic to untie the rope. So I'm not sure Sonic's supposed to work on organic. But anyway,
it's wood. It doesn't work.
It does when it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. So then we have this nice moment where the preparation for the wedding has to happen, where the men go off to the stag and the women go get henna tattoos, and the Doctor is getting, is with the women now because she's a woman, and so we have this funny
This is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Any references I make to gender or bodily regeneration, gender transmission and bodily regeneration are purely in jest, and they're meant to be humorous or something.
Such a comedian.
Just a comedian, yeah. They acted that well too, because everybody else is kind of going okay. They kind of that awkward chuckle of okay.
Yeah, the awkward Doctor again.
I totally liked how they establish in that scene that the hand tattoo that the hand tattoos are scorned by the young grandmother as not her own mother's best work, and she excuses it because she's had a bad day. And then at the end of the episode, when Yaz is showing the same hand tattoo to Gran is like, this is a terrible design.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so meta. I love it.
So it turns out that the Thijarians are, as we said, aren't assassins anymore. After their world was destroyed, and they found that their people had died alone, they decided to bear witness to all those throughout the universe who die alone. And I'm thinking,
so they're speakers for the dead now.
Yeah, but like everybody who dies alone in the universe, like everybody.
Well, I would assume they just mean all the ones they're able to.
I guess, yeah. I mean, like, they hang around on Earth for a while. Suppose that's very busy.
What I liked about this is another case where the Doctor is flat wrong and realizes it.
Yeah.
I love seeing this side of the Doctor where she assumes they're one thing, they're totally something else. And we had something like that in the previous episode with the Saranga conundrum, where the Doctor was acting selfish and hostile and got called on it and immediately recognized that was true. And so she showed emotional fallibility there. Here she's showing intellectual fallibility.
Yeah.
Yep.
And both of those are nice touches given the recent history of the show.
So I felt like this shift from evil demon to good witnesses is too sudden. Like why? So suddenly these demons who kept appearing and disappearing are suddenly willing to communicate who they are and what they're about when they didn't want to before. And it just didn't seem like they paid for that in the script. Like they didn't earn that conclusion, because after this they're not really involved in the plot.
So I would have to go back and rewatch the episode to see how many opportunities the Thijarians actually had to explain themselves, because they like disappear when they're shot at.
Yeah. And
you can understand that. You know, I wouldn't, if that's how I defend myself against being shot, okay, I'm not going to hang around to explain. And then the doctor breaks into their buried spaceship and they're not there to explain. And then when they do show up, the doctor yanks everybody out of the spaceship via the transmat, and then they're running from the Thijarians, and the doctor's taking the transmat locks, and then she locks them out of the barn so that they can't show up for 12 to 18 hours. Why that is, I'm not sure. That spaceship didn't look that far from the barn, so certainly not 12 to 18 hours away. I don't know why they can't just walk up and knock on the door.
Right.
But the episode has gone to great lengths to show the doctor and companions and associates getting away from the Thijarians, and one could argue that they simply haven't had the opportunity to explain themselves till now.
Okay. Well, one reason they couldn't just walk up is because it was a trap, like a tripwire. If you walked past it, it would transmat you somewhere else.
Away. Okay.
Yeah. That's what happened to Ryan.
Take like 12 to 18 hours to break the
encryption or something. Yeah. But the other, I mean, I get that they didn't have a chance to, but just from the writing of it, they're suddenly they're the major plot driver, and then suddenly they're not. And that was what I was talking about earlier, is I feel like in this season we have these aliens, but they're not quite sure what to do with them. And they kind of show up, and then they kind of just peter out. And
Chibnall is clearly more interested in our characters than in the science fiction aspects of all this.
Right.
What the way to solve this would be create really interesting science fiction characters. So you fuse the two together.
Right. Yes. I mean, it feels like almost like, well, it's a science fiction show. We have to have a few science fiction bits to go on top of our very interesting story about human nature, which I like this, like the stories, but the alien bits just don't fit.
An example of that would be like Davros,
right?
Who's a science fiction concept and a very interesting character. And here, you know, we have the Thijarians as concepts, but we know nothing about their personalities individually.
Right.
They're just ciphers, personality wise. By the way, I did want to compliment when they finally do crack the transmat locks and jump in and grab the doctor. That's an extremely effective abduction. The way the special effect works for that, and suddenly the doctor's gone. And that's one of the more effective cases of doctor-companion separation I've seen. And it wasn't produced by the stupid, you go this way, I'll go that way routine. It's like the doctor is yanked away from the companions in a very scary way.
Right.
Exactly.
So another nice moment is the conversation with Prim that Graham and Ryan have, where they say there's nothing worse than when normal people lose their minds, people who've lived together, and then they're told their differences are important, like they've learned nothing from the war. I'm like, wow. I mean, that right there might be the thesis for this show, is this idea of, you know, when normal people lose their minds and hate the person who they've lived next to and worked beside their entire lives and for generations.
And this is the point where I saw the familiarity both with the Rwandan genocide, but also with issues in our country today, where people spend more hatred and energy on, well, you're different because, and you need to give me this because, and it's all division. We're finding what divides us versus what unites us.
Right. We have the wedding ceremony that the doctor officiates at, because as a doctor, she's an important person and therefore can officiate because the Sadhu has died. And it says she says something in it. She says, love is a form of hope, and like hope, love abides in the face of everything. And I think,
yeah.
Well,
so the theologian in me was picking that apart.
Oh yeah, same here. Obviously, she's not talking about the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love.
But there are echoes there. And I would love to tease that apart a bit. I mean, there are echoes of 1 Corinthians 13 in that.
And she even says this is part of her faith. Now, where you can, so let's back up for just a second to set the context for that, because she's been asked to officiate at this wedding because Bhakti is dead, but she, as a doctor, is a respected woman. So her participation in the wedding would lend it dignity. And she says, "Oh, I haven't done a wedding since Einstein's."
Right.
And his or her parents opposed as well, which actually I believe is true. Einstein's first marriage was kind of bumpy. But then when then the doctor adds, as long as it's non-denominational. And so she's not going to either do a straight Hindu wedding or a straight Muslim wedding. She's not going to go into that. So fine. She's not a Hindu or a Muslim. I wouldn't expect her to. But then we have this reference to her faith in this context. And even though you could interpret this as a kind of secular faith, it's also open to the possibility that maybe there's something more than that. Maybe the doctor does have a kind of religious faith, not of a religion from earth, of course, but some kind of religious faith.
Yep. And I mean, I don't want to spend too much time. You know, I want to keep the show within a certain limit here, but there is something for me to this, you know, love abides and love and hope are related, certainly. And from a Christian point of view, St. Paul says the three virtues are faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. So they're interrelated. And in this context,
and we do have all three of those terms on the table: faith, hope, and love in this scene. Right.
And by these two people committing to each other in love in the midst of division and separation and hatred, it lends hope for the future. And that's
and then we go Stephen Moffat-y, because that makes them the strongest people on the planet, maybe the universe.
Right. Can't just be a nice couple who are in love.
Yeah, makes you strong.
Right. And then we have it made clear here that the demons of the Punjab are not the aliens who have shown up, but are the demons of racism and hatred. I mean, that's sort of laid out for us here. They collect I'm not sure what it is, the DNA of the memories of Prem after he's killed,
to add it to their memorial DNA database.
Well, which to me, and maybe this came up because of Remembrance Day and the anniversary of World War I. But to me, it felt like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I mean, they're remembering the dead who have been forgotten or who died unattended. And it's a bit like they've created a giant universal Tomb of the Unknown.
Yeah. So this is where we get to, and I think most of this episode is absolutely fine. I really liked aspects of it, but conceptually, here's where it started to fall apart for me. These guys are supposed to be witnesses for the unwitnessed dead. And so I was expecting Prem to be killed in such a way that he died alone.
Right.
And that is not what happens here.
No.
Instead, he's apparently shot by a former colleague of his who's sitting on horseback amid a group of horsemen with his own brother there. So in what way is his death unwitnessed? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Unless he doesn't die instantly. They ride away and he's left to die alone.
Well, but they don't show us that.
Exactly.
They need to show us that if that's what they're going to do.
And the aliens send the doctor and the companions away so that Prem is alone. Like, well, maybe he wouldn't be alone if we were here.
Yeah. I was going to mention that. And then it's not clear to me why they kill Prem. Now, there's a little bit of dialogue here that I couldn't quite figure out because of the accents, but it didn't seem to me the death was clearly set up, because what his brother says is they've come to check their land to see if there's anybody who doesn't belong. Right. And at this point, even though he's just married a Muslim woman, Prem belongs. And if it would make sense for his brother to like try to talk him out of this union or something like that. It is not clear to me that why one of these guys would just shoot him in this execution style. They haven't laid the foundation for that in dialogue. I thought they might do it with by introducing the concept of satyagraha, which is a kind of nonviolent passive resistance that Gandhi popularized, and where in the face of violence you do not resist. And so I thought we were going to have an escalation of tension between the parties, and Prim was going to say something like, you can kill me if you want, but I am not renouncing this woman, and I'm not renouncing my land.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you're gonna do this is by killing me. But they didn't do that. And so I don't understand why they would kill Prim in this situation,
right,
as opposed to humiliating him or just leaving or beating him up or I don't know what.
Well, and it's what I kind of figured was the idea that his wife and mother-in-law had gotten away.
Right.
But they, again, like you said, they don't say it. Would have been so easy for them just to add the one line, "Where is she?" And then have that happen.
And then kill him because he won't say. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. For him to die in that circumstance, they don't. Well, just like several things in this episode. There's so much I like, but several things they just don't close the loop on it. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
They don't pay for it in a way. So yeah,
they don't pay their dues.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. So we get this final scene where Yaz is now with her Nan in present day Umbreen, and I'm left with another question, which is does Umbreen remember Yaz? I mean, there's sort of this, for me, there felt like this implication that maybe Umbreen remembered Yaz, and that's even really in the beginning of this episode, she knew who she was or something.
I didn't get that. I think there may be a twinge there of like a subconscious memory.
Yeah.
But right. I don't think it's a conscious one, because if it were conscious, she would not have said at the end, "Do you want to know the story of the watch?" And then Yaz says, "Maybe another time."
Right. That's true. Yeah. It was very, again, it was another one of those open loops that I felt like needed to be more definitive. And then we get the closing, and for the second time this season, instead of the usual Doctor Who closing music, we have this Indian music over which I think might be, I couldn't tell. Was it an Indian version, a subcontinent version of the Doctor Who theme? I couldn't tell.
I didn't get that.
Yeah.
I thought it was an independent composition.
Okay, so there was definitely not the theme music in any case. So it was themed to the subject matter, and that's how we ended out there. So overall, it was, I mean, there's, like I said at the top, there's much I liked about this. There's some stuff I didn't like, and it felt like a Rosa 2.0 to me. That's my.
And it's too soon. I mean, I like the fact they're getting into Yaz's background because it's building out her character more. They needed to do that. But doing it this way, it's like this shouldn't be living so close to Rosa.
Right. Okay. Good. So we do have a little bit of feedback I wanted to get to from our Facebook page at the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page on the Saranga Conundrum, which was last week's episode. Rick Angelini says, I think that is an issue with the pacing of the shows this season. He says, the Ghost Monument moved far too slowly. Arachnids and Saranga Conundrum moved very quickly with rapid-fire dialogue. Key elements of the plot are lost in the fast pace, particularly the dialogue, and I always watch with subtitles on. I'm having a terrible time with the accents this season. I really don't catch the full story until I watch the episode a second time. Thank goodness for the DVR. So we mentioned that earlier, the problem with the accents. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about the pacing as well? The different pacing. Does it matter if I didn't feel like Ghost Monument moved slowly from my point of view. But do you feel like any of the episodes move too slowly or too fast?
Well, that's kind of always been a problem with New Who, because they've limited themselves to the 45-minute format.
Right.
Now 50
or 50. Well, rough time frame.
Yep.
It was 45 for a long time, and now it's 50. But they've had to pack too much into too many stories. Where they take these stories and they have to kind of compress them a little bit. It's like the exact opposite that Classic Who had, where, we've got this much more of the story to tell. Well, let's throw a few chase scenes in so that we can then, extend it for another episode or two.
You mean like War Games?
Hamburger Helper.
Yeah.
But like War Games for the Second Doctor, which was like 10 episodes.
So, I mean, I think it's just a symptom of the format that they have chosen for New Who in general. And this season, we just might be noticing it a bit more.
Okay.
This season.
So, and then Heather Comstock sends a message. She says, I thought this was a great episode, Saranga Conundrum. It was a refreshing romp after 2 somewhat uneven episodes. I liked how they were in overload of things to solve and the fast pace. So she liked the fast pace. I felt like I got to know the characters enough to care about them and their fates, and I fall squarely in the pro-Pating camp, a bit like having a hungry, destructive toddler running amok. As always, I know what you mean. I had a Destructo who was a toddler. As always, I enjoyed hearing your analysis of the episode. Actually, the Pating is a lot like my son Anthony when he was a toddler. Yeah. So Heather liked the pace,
and toddlers will put anything in their mouth, and drain the energy from it.
Exactly, especially their parents. So Heather liked the pacing. So it's interesting, two different perspectives on that, the different pacings. One thing I want to mention, do you have, I'm sorry, instead of Jimmy, did you have anything to say on Heather's comment?
No, not in particular. I thought it was very perceptive.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather and Rick. And one last thing, I saw a news article that claimed that the ratings for Doctor Who are plummeting after the initial premiere episode, and it's Doctor Who's in danger.
No, actually, the ratings are very good.
Yeah, in fact, the ratings that they were citing were very different from the ones that I'm seeing. I don't know where they're getting their numbers from. Now, there has been a drop-off from the premiere. The premiere had 10.9 million UK viewers. Saranga had 7.76 million. So a little drop off.
And that's normal in a TV series. Yep. Normally the premiere, with all the advanced publicity it gets, is higher than the episodes that immediately follow it.
Well, right. And the numbers that I've been seeing, they'll have the overnight numbers, meaning the people who watched it the night of or DVR'd it.
Yep.
And then they'll have like the 7-day numbers, and that will a lot of times include the online viewership as well. Those who went to BBC's website and watched it there, or watched it through Amazon, like Jimmy does, or something like that. But this doesn't count. But again, it's 7 days, so someone could watch this episode, say, in a week, and it's not going to count.
Right.
So the numbers, and I've been following this guy on YouTube. I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but I may mention it in a future episode, who actually does a weekly analysis of the ratings numbers, and he compares them to prior seasons. And actually, Jodie Whittaker's numbers, or the Jodie Whittaker era numbers, are much better than what we've had. They blow the Peter Capaldi era away. We haven't seen numbers this good in quite a number of years.
Since his first season. She's, in fact, Saranga, which is the lowest rated from so far this season, surpasses everything but the premiere episode of Capaldi's first season. So,
and if they're looking at the overnight viewership, in our the way people watch TV today, at least Gen X and millennials, at least, is we watch it recorded, we watch it streaming, we watch it.
These aren't just the overnight.
Days later. We don't sit down and watch it as it's being broadcast a lot anymore.
No, they don't. In fact, actually, they don't. Usually, when you see ratings, it's usually the long ratings, because they know that that's not how people watch anymore. So you will often get the overnights, but when you see the ratings are X, it's usually the night plus 7 or something, whatever they call it.
I don't know. I didn't read the particular article that you're talking about, Dom, but I would be surprised at all if he is purposely using the overnight numbers.
Right. Well, and this was in a paper
to make it look worse than it is.
Yeah, this was in one of the UK tabloids. The Sun, I think it was.
Oh, well, UK tabloids, those are always reliable and not unfairly biased.
Exactly.
To generate drama.
Right. So, so that's it for feedback and other bits of interesting. So next week, to kind of jump ahead here, we're going to be celebrating our 100th episode of The Secrets of Doctor
Kerblam.
Who. With Kerblam, which I think is appropriate. It's like we're shooting off fireworks to celebrate. So that'll be sure to be lots of fun to join us. I don't have anything special planned, folks. We have a new episode of Doctor Who to talk about. What else can you do to celebrate? So
we may come up with something.
Yes, we'll have cake. So that's it from us. So you tell us, what did you think of Demons of the Punjab and what we had to say about it? And you can let us know by going to sqpn.com or to the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leave us some feedback on the show where it's posted there, or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And you can find links to our personal social media and websites on our show notes at sqpn.com. And like Jimmy said, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing Kerblam. That's the title, folks. Kerblam. Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me in sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
My pleasure, Dom.
Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
Thank you. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, what's the point of having a mate with a time machine if you can't nip back and see your gran?
Right. This is going to be fun.
This is Dom Bettinelli again. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and that you'll help us keep producing the podcast you love. Thank you for your generosity. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give.